Hello and welcome to another episode of Disney Movie Investigation. If this is your first time watching, welcome to the show. In each episode, we take a look at a movie that is featured on Disney+. On this episode, we're taking a look at a Disney classic when we take a look at Fantasia. And if you are enjoying these episodes, I do ask that you please hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified with each new episode. Now sit back and enjoy this episode of Disney Movie Investigation. So like I said, today we are covering Fantasia. This movie was released on November 13th, 1940. Each sequence had a different director, so I'm not going to list all the directors, but there were a lot of them. The production companies were Walt Disney Pictures, and it was distributed by RKO Pictures. The budget for this movie was $2.28 million, and it did a box office return of $83.8 million. So just let you guys know, this is going to be a part one of two video, just because this Fantasia has a lot of history behind it. I'm not going to go into full detail because there's like books that are totally written just on Fantasia, but this will be some of the highlights of the making of Fantasia. So let's go back to the beginning. So in 1936, when Snow White was still in production, Walt Disney felt that Mickey Mouse needed a boost in popularity because his two other creations, Donald Duck and Goofy, were becoming more popular than Mickey. He decided that Mickey should star in an adaptation of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and unlike his earlier silly symphony cartoons, this would be fantasy unfolded onto the big screen. So Disney would end up meeting Leopold Stokowski, who was the leader of the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra, at a restaurant in Hollywood. Disney would pitch him the piece of Mickey starring in A Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Stokowski was offered Disney to do his orchestra services for free. Disney said, no, that's okay, and he would ultimately pay him $5,000 for his services, which ended up being initially a 3-hour recording session at Culver Studios in California. This movie developed along, and after production costs rose to over $125,000, Walt's brother Roy told him that his production would never recoup the production costs at this rate. So they decided to extend the film to a full feature in 1938, and in August, Disney asked Stokowski to return to the studio to help pick additional musical pieces for the film. The name internally was called the concert feature, and Disney would agree to pay Stokowski an additional $80,000 plus royalties for his help on the film. Music critic Deems Taylor was also brought in to help work with Stokowski, as Walt had become busy with Pinocchio and Bambi, as well as the development of his new animation studio in Burbank. So in terms of the story meetings of Fantasia, the program was assembled in various story meetings beginning in September of 1938. So Disney writers Joe Grant and Dick Huemer would work with Stokowski to select the musical pieces. Walt Disney himself did not contribute to the selection of the music, as he admitted to everyone that he had very little knowledge of classical music. Some of the pieces that were in consideration but were never used included the Prelude in G minor, Motu Perpetuo, and Clair de Lune. On September 29th of 1938, 60 of Disney's artists would gather for a piano concert of the pieces selected, including a rough animated version of The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The title of the film remained the concert feature until publicist at RKO, Hal Horn, wanted a different title, and he suggested that the title should be Philharmonic Concert. This didn't sit well with Walt, so he actually held a contest in the studio to come up with a new name for the film and had at least 1,800 different suggestions, but his favorite was Fantasia. So we're going to take a look at this video is going to be a little different than the usual one. So we're going to take a look at the individual segments and then just kind of go through some trivia about them. So more than 1,000 artists were involved in the making of Fantasia, and the movie actually contains over 500 animated characters, and the scenes were color keyed so that each scene would flow naturally. Each segment had their own color scheme that would flow with the mood of the musical piece. The character model development, in order to help some of the artists, would sculpt 3D clay models so that animators could view their subjects from all angles. The studio would also build a new multi-plane camera that added 3 more levels of layers, so that the final film would actually have 3,500 feet of multi-plane footage, which is more than Snow White and Pinocchio combined. So they wanted to create that depth with a lot of the animation, so we had to add these 3 additional layers. So let's take a look at the individual pieces. So the first one is Toccata and Fugue in D minor. So primary designs for this were done by Cy Young, who was influenced by the patterns on the edges of film. And in 1938, Disney would hire Oscar Fischer, who had produced abstract art, to work with Young. However, Disney would dismiss Fischer's work as it was too abstract for audiences at the time. There was an idea being floated around for this piece to make the segment 3D, but it was determined to be too experimental at the time. So the next segment that we have is the Nutcracker Suite. So animator Art Babbitt said that the mushroom dance sequence for this part of the film, he actually took inspiration from the Three Stooges. And the studio would actually hire professional ballet dancers wearing ballet skirts that resembled the blossoms of the dance of the flutes to kind of help give them inspiration. An Arabian dancer was brought in for test footage for the Arabian dance. And to avoid ink outlines in this segment, transparent paint was used when coloring the sequences. For the snowflake segment of this piece, they would use diagrams of real snowflakes and paint them translucent white. And then they would use them on a revolving spool and film them using a stop motion technique. So one of the more famous pieces of Fantasia is The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And early on, it was actually considered, before they decided to use Mickey, they actually considered using Dopey for this segment instead of Mickey Mouse. But they decided that because of that popularity that we touched on earlier, Mickey Mouse was the right choice. And he would actually be redesigned for the film. And Mickey would actually have pupils for the first time to give him more expressions and more emotion. And then live action footage was shot for the artists, where a UCLA athlete was asked to run and jump across the soundstage with a series of barrels in the way to stimulate Mickey traveling through water. English silent film actor Nigel DeBura was hired to portray Yin Sid for the camera reference. And they also brought in the sorcerer's robe and a hat from the costume shop that was decorated with the stars and crescent moons that you see in the final film. And I think this is pretty much well known, but the sorcerers is named Yin Sid, which is Disney spelled backwards. So the next segment is The Rite of Spring. This early concept of the film wanted to explore the evolution of mammals to the first humans. However, it was changed by Disney, who did not want to stir controversy from creationists about connection evolution with humans. Roy Chapman Andrews, who's the director of the American Museum of Natural History, along with botanist Julie Huxley, paleobotanist Bram Brown, and astronomer Edwin Hubie was brought in as consultants in the piece. Animators would also study comets at the Mount Wilson Observatory, along with iguanas and baby alligators being brought into the studio to help with inspiration. The next segment we have is the Pastoral Symphony. The animators would be specific on touchy issues where the female centaurs would be drawn bare-breasted. However, the Hays office enforcing motion picture production codes would insist that they hang garlands around their necks. So you see them bare-breasted at the very beginning of the piece, but very shortly after, when they exit the water, they are wearing garlands or flowers over top. The male centaurs would also be toned down to be less intimidating. And originally, the segment included a pair of black centaurs who were tended to the others, but this was cut shortly after release date because of implication of racism arose. I believe it's the black centaur is named Buttercup, and you actually can see this footage on YouTube. So the next segment is the Dance of the Hours. This sequence was directed by Norm Ferguson and Thornton He. Disney wanted to present animals performing a caricature ballet sequence with comedic slips. So the design of the alligators and the elephants were based on those by German illustrator Henrik Cayley, and the hippos and the ostrich were based on cartoonist T.S. Sullivan's artwork. In order to get inspiration, artists would actually visit the Griffith Park Zoo to study the movement of most of the animals. And Disney animator John Hench would admit that he did not know anything about ballet, so Walt Disney would give him season tickets to the Ballet Russo de Monte Carlo with backstage access so he could become an expert. The lead ostrich is based on Irina Baranova, while the lead hippo is based on Margie Chapman and Tiana Rubikanaski, and the lead alligator, who's named Ben Alligator, is based on David Lynch. And so the final segment is The Night on Bald Mountain. So this sequence was directed by Wilfred Jackson and Chernobog being animated by Vladimir Tatlia. Bela Lugosi was actually brought in to provide pose references for Chernobog, but Tatlia did not like the results, and he instead got Wilfred Jackson to pose shirtless, and he was satisfied with that reference footage. So the final shot of the movie featured a black background and a shining white light, and it would actually measure into 217 feet of film and was the longest continuous scene of animation to date. And originally the film, because it was 270 feet, would contain jitters from animators' different pencil lines. So Disney forced his animators to redo the sequence 4 different times to get it up to his standards. And it happened so late that I was actually rushed to the New York premiere of Fantasia with 4 hours to spare. And then, so just a little bit of the live action sequences. They were filmed at Stage 1 in the Disney studio in Burbank. And the on-screen musicians were actually local musicians, with the soundtrack being recorded earlier by the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra. And in 1940, Ub Iwerks was being rehired by Disney, and he was the technical supervisor for special effects. And his first animation sequence upon being rehired was the handshake between Mickey Mouse and Stokowski. The way this worked is the animators would place the animated drawing over the photographic print and match arm movements to what had been filmed in live action. So we're just going to talk a little bit about Fantasound. So this is one of the kind of legacies of Fantasia, is the Disney brothers would actually contact David Smirnoff of RCA to create a new sound system that would create the illusion of the orchestra playing in the theater. Initially, he said no for financial reasons. It would be too expensive. But he would ultimately agree in July of 1939, as long as the Disneys could hold down the estimated $200,000 in costs. They would perform many different setups, with the final product being Fantasound, which is what we would know today as stereophonic surround sound. The concept back in 1940 was that there would be 2 projectors running at the same time, with one carrying the picture film with a monotrack soundtrack as a backup. The other projector would run a soundtrack that was 9 different recorded tracks and mix them into edited down into 4 final tracks. 3 were for the left, right, and center speaker, and the 4th track was for the amplitude and frequency to control the volume of the 3 tracks. As well, 3 additional speakers would surround the theater to act as surround channels or surround sound. And a 5th of the film's budget was actually spent to develop recording techniques to make this project work for the different theaters around the country. So we're going to stop it there, for this is the end of part 1. On our next video, we will explore the release of Fantasia, along with the legacy that the film has left behind. So I would love for anyone to please leave a comment on what they think so far of Fantasia, and what is your favorite sequence of the film, like which is your kind of number 1 favorite. Mine is definitely Sorcerer's Apprentice. So until next time, I hope you have a magical day, and we will see you real soon.